Yes, and so this morning, November 25th, Friday, sorry, uh, the year 2022, we're going to interview Dr. Olaf Hendricks, known to us locally as Bronco. And Dr. Hendricks is one of our esteemed musicians. And to make it just short and sweet, he is esteemed because he goes on both sides of the musical fence. He plays with on the popular side of music, and he plays on what we would consider the folkloric side of music, and something that very few musicians do and are actually able to do well. And so this morning we're going to speak with Dr. Olaf Bronco Hendricks.
There you
And we're going to get some history. We're going to get a lesson in about music, because it will be largely about music here in the islands, and especially St. Croix. So good morning, Bronco, and you could just give us a little brief overview of yourself.
go. Sure, I was born while my parents lived in Freegut on King Cross Street, and we were living right in the center of what we call the down street part of Freegut, which were the last two blocks going to the north. And again, like we said earlier, this whole notion of Freegut is one that has been sort of fluid, and that's good, because I don't know if there ever was a map that says this is Freegut, although I'm sure. But what it was, as you indicated earlier, was that this is the place where, like in Frederickstead, there's a Freegut also.
And I think there was a map, because if I can remember, can't tell you in detail, but I remember this artist or local artist, Lavon Bell, did a project with Freegut, and she actually identified a specific, geographical area, which, if I remember correctly, was much smaller than it is now.
Yeah, and that's the problem. That's why I say that maybe officially and initially there were these, very strict demarcations. But as time went on, and as more people became so-called freed, and people moved in and out, and they would self-describe as being Freegonians, or people from Freegut. So I was born up there in the 1944, and at that time most of us were born in houses, and I was delivered by my cousin Miss England, who was a midwife, and she lived right on the corner anyway. So that was my first and early life.
Okay, and this question I'm going to ask it sounds apparently to me a foolish question, because I know, for the little I know of you, it's a foolish question for me to ask you, but I still got to ask you. And I might even give the answer before I ask you. The question is about your musical education, but if you tell me your musical education was in the university or somebody's backyard or something with a bunch of local hillsiders, older fellows playing music, I could accept that. Because I know for a lot of people around here, that's how it was.
It was sort of a hybrid, because you're correct. My first significant exposure to music on a consistent basis was Raleigh Philippus them. And then from there, it got to be all the way over to Farm Hill. And some of the musicians, I think Ivan Tom and those guys, and they would come around the streets, and so on. But when I went to Howard, I decided I was going to study some music along with pre-med. And I took a course in beginning piano. And the guy said to me, or the music teacher said to me, he gonna let me pass, but when I put my hand on the keyboard, it looked like two crabs going up a hill. So it wasn't very encouraging. So that was it. And then I got in Finch, and I started to go to Mr. Tolan when he was out by your family's place across the street. At one time, Mr. Tolan had a building there. This is across the street in the area of Jiffy Mart.
Oh, my uncle, my great uncle.
Yes, yes, yeah. And so Gordon Finch and I went there, and Mr. Tolong always had these long introductions to every class. And I went there for a sax, and Gordon went for a sax. I think Gordon got his sax, but I got a French horn. And girls didn't like French horn. So I was ready to leave. And then after that, I got a sax, but he used to come and tell us his stories. By then, he was an older man. And, you know, and so we didn't last. And that was the extent. And then, also in St. Mary's School, there was a nun we used to call her Mother Rembert. And her name changed to Sister Anne. She was a heck of a music teacher. And most of the guys that came out of St. Mary's School in the 60s were her students. And we could do elementary reading, you know, nothing, you know. Mary had a little allowance for some of us and so on. And most of us that were in those musical classes went on into music of some level or another.
No, I know you know, played a lot of different styles of music, but we will try to maybe focus more on Quelbe.
Yeah.
What was your introduction? How did you get into the Quelbe music?
Again, that was something that was more serendipitous or almost accidental in that. One of the first bands, as I said, we heard consistently, the first musical group was Raleigh Philippus. But Raleigh didn't play a lot of Quelbe in those days, you know. He played songs like Cruising Down the River, Enjoy Yourself, and some other pretty much American standards, you know, and with that strum, that, you know, and it was a bunch of hillsiders who were the musicians. And I think they had other talents, you know, they worked other places, but they also used to go up there. If they're going to play music, they're going to cook. And this sort of was a predecessor to what Stanley them did in the yard, right across the street, actually. And so Raleigh was one of my first influences, to be honest with you, with the kind of instrumentation, because he had a muffler or an ass pipe. And he had a keg, he had a maribola, you know, and those were the kinds of instruments that he had, and different people. He had bongos, bongos, and so they would play some Quelbe, and later on they got more into Quelbe, and that's when Raleigh became known as a Quelbe so-called musician. And so that was one of my first influences. And then there were the other guys that would want to come around the street. Ivan Tom, the Serenaders, and you would hear the violin. Then the Wild Indians, you would hear them. Excellent, to me, was so rhythmic, and all of these things were early influences. And then, of course, the vibratones. But the Quelbe itself, as a pure musical entity, I never really got into until I started listening to some of the music that my father would hum or sing. Because my father, I was told, was an excellent quadrille dancer when they used to have it in Beer Garden and in St. Mary's Hall, you know, back in the, I guess, the 50s and so on. And Daddy would sing these songs and hum them, and I learned a lot of them back in the days.
Let me interrupt and just quickly, if you don't want to take too much time with it, but you mentioned something that I don't hear anybody talk about anymore. You mentioned Beer Garden.
Yeah.
What was Beer Garden? Where was that?
I was too young to have been there, but that was a place that they used to have quadrilles, but it was also a place that served as a not a rum shop, but a place where you could go. And it was up
right there on the Company Street, I think, from Hall, somewhere on Company Street, to the edge.
I think the Beer Garden, from what I understand, was up right above where Sing's places. In that corner, on that corner between, there was a gentleman that used to live on the corner, and then further going up towards Sing. In that area there was a place called a Beer Garden. And I didn't know my father to go there, but that was a place that had musical history with
Okay.
us. So he would go there. My father would again come back. Certainly at St. Mary's, several people told me how my father could have cut a quadrille up, you know, and so that's what he did. And like I said, I heard a lot of the Quelbe songs from him there doing that.
And then I guess there's a part of the history with you there that we will be more familiar with, and that's your experience and your time with the Ten Sleepless Nights.
Well, it goes before that. I used to play with the 5 notes.
Oh, okay, all right.
And in that time, I made a mistake too. In that time, we had Mr. Hasford up by what might be the edge of Freegut and that street. I forget the name of the street. Yeah, he lived across from a place we call Gibeon. And Mr. Hasford and his wife, I do have a photograph with his wife, his lady, Sana.
You do?
Yeah, I have a picture with she and Anna Philippos.
I would love to see that.
I'd look for it.
I have a picture with a band that he had, but that was more in the 70s. I think it was taken on the time when Mary Jane Soul was here.
Yes.
And he had Anna Philippos, but the other guitar player was Viola Mesa, who was Hiram's mother, Hiram Towers.
I think she might be the third person in that photo. So it was Anna Philippos, Sana, so Miss
You
Hasford.
know, Hasford had a unique band.
Yes.
It was a very unique band. He's the only band I know wrong here. He had 3 women in that band.
Well, that's them. That's them.
Yeah.
I
He
think.
had Sana,
Yeah.
who was Elmo's mother.
And she played mandolin.
Right. And then you had Viola Mesa, who played guitar, Hiram's mother.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you had Anna Philippos, who played the
Steel.
squash.
Steel or squash. Yes.
Squash, I think.
And I have them. The picture that I see depicts them with these
I would
instruments.
love to see that.
I would be happy. I'm gonna take a look for it and try and give it to you.
Yes, well, let me. I'm gonna go to a questions here. I said, says here, what would you like the future generations to know about you and your music?
Well, first of all, my music was quite dialectic. It was almost anything. We just loved music, you know, and I played very briefly with the Moonshiners steel band. Yeah, and then there was a group of girls, ladies used to play steel band too. The Bells of St. Mary's. I think people like Teresa Moore, Clinton Langnam's sister Lynette, she was one of them, Mortal Christian, for Papa Christian's daughter. These were all people that played in that steel band. It was all ladies, all girls. But my thing was dialectic, and whenever I heard music, I was just drawn to it. I would be, as a young child, I would come down. And one time I remember being on the wharf right by where the custom house is, that they're fixing the stairs now. And my son, let me tell you, the band that was down there, that they scared the heck out of me. They were playing wild Indian music, and I never heard music so aggressive in my life. It was aggressive. It scared me, because
I don't think you were the only person. You used to scare me.
you know, but they were good. They were excellent musicians, particularly
You see the performers, the costumes and things.
yes, with that funny strainer, yes, kind of thing. And then, of course, like I said, I also had the influence of Doc James, because Doc James used to be the organist at St. Mary's, at the church, and for the school functions. And he and the vibratones, and I knew some of the guys in the vibratones, including Norris Moorhead, used to play sax.
I've seen that. I got a list from Scipio.
Okay.
All those old players, the original players.
Yes, and Steve Bostic sometimes sang with them. And it was, that band to me was like heaven, and that's the first real band that I knew, and also some of the people I knew. So those things, my musical background, you know, drew from all of these people, and of course, by high school it was Wesley and Archie Thomas, and those guys, and so on. And there was a gentleman named Cibola. Drummer, yes, he was related to.
Adams.
Yes, he was related, I think, to Larry Bowden, And I remember this man, he lived not too far from us on King Cross Street. And I would see him there and, knew that he played drums and I would see him.
I knew his son.
Okay.
He had a son named Ina Jr.
Oh, I remember Ina.
He got paid by London Bridge.
That's the
He
same
went to the
place.
States back in the 60s, years ago, donkey years ago.
I think that's the same place where he lived by land. It was in the same street.
Yeah, he lived there with, I think a lady was his grandmother, name is Elsa.
Yes.
Because at the time I was living across the street, upstairs.
I remember that.
Monkey.
Yeah.
He was my great grandfather. I had a little store in the corner there.
Miss Elsa. You know who went to live when they came here to St. Croix, right next to Miss Elsa?
Oh, Janelle.
Janelle.
So, yeah, I remember him being there, yes.
Janelle, and he had a friend named Mario. He used to live there with him. Yeah, but so that area right there was some, and then of course Larry Bow started. He used to walk, come past us, and yeah. So all these musicians, and there were people that you could approach and ask, to touch the drum or to touch something. And I don't know if you remember Roland Smith. He left here a long time ago, but his father Smith, he used to play sax in rally band.
Oh, I know. I know of that person. I think I've seen him, but I didn't know him personally. The woman.
Yes.
He used to ride around on a little Vespa.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, somebody told me he played saxophone. Yes.
He played sax.
They call him Smithy.
Smithy. And what's his name? Lived up there for a while, Mr. Light.
I went to school with a couple of his sons.
Well, Roland was the oldest one. I think it would
I
be.
didn't know Roland.
Okay, Roland Smith. He left before he finished
I
school.
knew the younger ones here.
Oh, yes, there's one that's a nurse, a male nurse.
Oh, okay.
A nice guy.
Well,
But
I want to go back to a little bit of the Quelbe thing before we run out of time and what your more experience with quadrilla. And again, like I said, I know from what I know at least is mostly experience with around 10 sleepless nights
Right.
that brought you into
Quelbe.
direct contact into that
Yes.
that music.
Yes.
Tell us about that music, necessarily about the band or what you could mention musicians, but how do you feel about that the music? What do you think should happen for the future with the music and how it's going?
I think we're fortunate in the sense that we have a band like the 10 Sleepless Nights and the other bands that have been around, because these people are, I hate to say this, but these people to me are Quelbe people. They live the life of that particular aspect of our culture. And Stanley them and Greenbug them, I don't know if they did it. I don't know how they came to do this, but right across the street, these guys, every day, like they'll actually live that culture, would roast fish, would do all the kinds of things that we did that persisted from a century before. And so to me, their traditions, other than music, were consistent with what they did with the music. And then, of course, there were people like Pierpoint who came from a generation before us. But I like the music because it told the stories, and that's one thing about Quelbe. It always tells a story for the most part. And it told the stories that, to me, were very important and that I learned a lot about us. And you taught me something about that lady with the fish. Remember I introduced you to Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Yes. And unfortunately he died. But that was his sister or some family.
Well, he told us, I remember he said some family,
Yes.
I don't know how close it was, but
Yes.
he said
Or
that
his
Julia
niece.
Moody was his family.
That's right. And I have a book on him.
Okay.
And so and you did, because you used to sing about her.
Yeah, and it was an old song that I learned from my grandfather.
You see?
And it was when I spoke with him, I realized the historical connection with song, which is something that I didn't really doubt. I knew all along that a lot of them, just of you saying, because their songs tell a story. I found that out a good while back, that the Quelbe songs are all historical. They all talk about real people and real events, and most of them at least. I would say 95% of them. And you could actually trace part of St. Croix history, part of ordinary history, and even some mention of world history in the Quelbe songs. If people made songs to commemorate these different events or to sing about people, they had songs that even talk about certain experience of World War II.
Yes.
You had one with World War I. Remember that song Stanley them recorded?
Vietnam.
Even Vietnam War.
Yes.
But before they changed it to Vietnam War.
Yeah.
But it was when the war broke out in Belgium.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of these events that could be traced back through the songs, if you know the lyrics of the songs, which is something that is really being lost. You know?
And
that's why I asked you the question, your ideas on the future of this music. And, you know.
Well, again, you used to sing a lot of the historical Quelbe music, and I learned a lot from you, like this song, Mr. BT, and them kind of things. But there was another carousel here that a lot of people don't seem to know. My father used to tell me about it, other than La Biga carousel.
Okay.
There was another one. I would have to go and look it up. But
and I believe you're right, because my grandfather told me about a flute player.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, and I'm sorry I didn't even find out much more. But he said this person used to play the music for the carousel.
Okay.
The carousel, they used to hire a band to play.
Okay.
The music, you know, for while this thing spinning and playing.
You know, with reference to where the Quelbe going, or where it should go, in my opinion, it should, and I like the fact that they taught it in schools. I don't know if they still do, but I like that because my grandson today could sing some of the Quelbe songs that he picked up in the schools around here when he was in the elementary school. And you know, and he doesn't live here. But the thing about it is, I hope it would remain a part of us because it keeps us with a sense of a frame of reference, you know, and it tells us this is who we were, this is where we are, and we could check, are we still on course based on where we came from? I don't mean to live in the past, but I mean, we were a very proud people. We were a people, you know, that worked hard. We learned a lot of skills. These little islands had some highly skilled people. And we also had an ability for people to break through the so-called chains of their social status, you know, in both ways. Either the so-called high society people come down to dance Quelbe, or the so-called working class. When they're going the Quelbe mode, they're kings and queens and princesses and princes. You know, and I don't mean to copy Europe.
I understand what you mean. I understand exactly what you mean. Right?
And my
it's the spirit.
Yes, my frame of reference is Africa. You see, so I am very fortunate to have seen that curve take place.
Well, you know, I have to say you have a real optimistic view of the whole thing. My view is not as optimistic because I see where, especially for the music with the bands, I see where that is basically dying, the musician. I'm having a hard time even trying to keep a band together because getting musicians to play the music, you know, and play it in the right way.
Right.
You know, now the dancing part of it, I've noticed for years, the dancing part of it doesn't really pose too much of a problem. You can always teach students in your school. You could get your class, a teacher could pull his class and just teach the dances, and students love it. You know, I have found that out. Even the young, they love it when they get into the dancing. But the music, the music part of it, the playing of the music has been difficult, and that seems to be all the musicians die now. One of the reasons we're doing this interview with you, and we're doing it with a series of them with other people, because of the musicians are going now.
But you know, there's still hope because I've seen a lot of going back and fetching. You know, that African word Sankofa. So I've seen it and I experienced it. And I'm optimistic about the whole phenomenon because it grounds us. And once you're grounded, for instance, I have a statement, you know the word Tilili, old lady walk a mile and a half. So T-I-L-I-L-I. So T-I is taste it, first L-I is love it, and the second L-I is live it. So once you get a taste of our Quelbe, you're going to learn it, you're going to live it, you're going to do all of that. And to me, that's the key. And when people teaching it, don't teach it as if though it's some kind of inferior anything. You got to teach it with pride, and you got to show people that this is a part of our warriorship. You see?
It's on the same level with any other style of music.
Yes.
But you know, for years I've always emphasized trying to get that message across to a lot of music teachers that the way to help keep this thing alive is to form choral groups. Get the children singing the songs in choral groups, you know. And then to me that would help the songs live on even greater.
Yes.
You know, but I haven't seen it being done yet, and I would love to see it with an adult group.
Yeah.
Get some adults together and form a choral group and have them sing these songs like a folkloric review.
St. Thomas does a lot of that.
Yes.
Not necessarily with Quelbe,
But
right.
they do, yes,
Yes.
because they have at Christmas time they do have this thing off that's going to be coming up pretty soon. Too.
And you're right, because they've been doing this for decades and decades. Yes.
Exactly,
So
yes. Oh, we start with that. You good? Still good? We still got some time? Oh, okay. I just having this thing with time in mind. So I
appreciate it.
Since you tell me that.
You got scheduled for 10:30.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Bronco, let me ask you this, because this is a little straying away from the question, but since we have a little time, yeah, you could actually get a little more personal. I said, have you ever written any music or lyrics yourself?
yeah, first of all, the theme song, the current theme song for PBS is a song I wrote.
Okay.
Bidu bidu bididi dan din dan din din dum ba. I had written a song with a big ego saying it's like Sonny. When I was growing up, they called me Sonny. Almost anybody that was named like their father, instead of Junie, they would call you Sonny too. And I wrote this song with this big intention of sharing it with Sonny Rollins. And the name of the song was Sonny Them, me and Sonny. And then one day in 2008, Tanya called me and says, we need a theme song for the station. And that was it, and it's been there. It's played every break. That's the one song I wrote. Then I wrote Bronco's Jig. There are about 4 other songs in Stanley's repertoire that I have written and that are still being played.
That's good. That's good. Yes. That's good. Well, the last question actually here on the side is something I think we touched on before. It says, tell me about those who have gone before, those who have passed. Besides Raleigh, who, and I guess Christian Hasford, any other of the old time like Quelbe players? Because I think Ivan Tom Roberts played the fiddle or the violin.
Violin, yeah.
Man, how I wish I could get that song out of your head and get it in mind. You know, I envy you being able to have heard that song. Because it will never left you. You will always remember hearing that song.
That's
I never
right.
heard it.
Okay.
I could only try to imagine,
Yes.
you know, based on how I know the song of violin, what it may have sung like. You know what I'm saying? But I don't know if Ivan Tom was, and he may have been too. I don't know if he was directly a Quelbe man, because see, I make the kind of little distinction or separation of players who were playing the popular dance band music and the people who were playing the folkloric side, the Quelbe and the quadrille. Because a lot of the players didn't necessarily do both. You know, most of the players who've been, like, say, playing in dance band, trumpet, sax, and keyboard, and them kind of thing, drum set, guitar, most of those players then, not that they didn't appreciate the music, but they didn't play that style. They didn't play quadrille music. They may play a couple of Quelbe tunes. I know that over the years that was their calypso, but they didn't do the Quelbe quadrille thing. And most of the quadrille players, and this is not to put them down, but most of the quadrille players didn't or couldn't play that other style either. And of course, you know, well, my experience showed me most of the Quelbe players were self-taught. They didn't know a whole, like a guitar player, they didn't know a whole lot of cards, and you know. But I can tell you, the few cards that they knew, they played the hell out of them. I mean, they mastered it. You know, in terms of harmonically, Quelbe is simple. But those musicians play the hell out of those street cards. And I tell you, very few people could play like how they play.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? But I was just saying that to say that you found, there were a few that went back and forth, but most of those players didn't play the big dance band, them, like vibratones and them kind of band. You see what I'm saying? Quelbe players didn't fit in that. Though they both appreciated each other, but you had 2 different styles going there.
And Archie Thomas them could do both, but not the real Quelbe song per se.
Well, Wesley was something else, man.
Yeah.
So you could hear it in his playing.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't doubt that he could do both.
Yeah.
Because he played with instruments too, you know.
Yes.
So, you know,
And there was a gentleman that used to play with the vibratones years back. He used to play guitar for. I think his name was. I think it was Peterson also.
Oh, Gustav. Yeah,
Yeah.
Gustav. Yeah, well, Paypoint's brother.
Yes, paper. That's what I just
well,
want to
most
say.
of those, that Peterson family, those brothers were very versatile.
Yeah.
You know, bass musicians.
Yeah.
Ivan Pete, his
Yeah.
son Bronco just died. I'm sorry, that one. Fuma,
Yes.
son Fuma just died.
Schumer was a hell of a musician.
But that Peterson family was very talented. They even had a sister who used to sing.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
so.
I remember. And Sidel took over, and you know when she was. And let me say this: that when it goes from one genre to another, it like you said, it wasn't very common. And I never heard, for instance, that Mr. Anderson, them Crimean, you know, Crimean, they used to play aguinaldos, and it wasn't quite the regular thing, but Crimi also played in the vibratones.
Right.
So he had a mixture of genres, and I suspect I'm sure Crimi could have played Quelbe music, you know, but it was like you said, they stayed in one genre and pretty much stayed there. And I was just able, like, as I said, Rally them did not play a lot of Quelbe, but they were more into American hits, you know. And so, yes, I understand. But I think there's hope for us. I think that one of us is going to, you know, finally get a way to get this music to be preserved and in place, have it in place. Like you said, it may be the chorale version, process. That might be the way to do it, you know. But I have faith that it's going to happen.
That's good. We will optimistic view of the whole thing.
Yes.
You know, I try to stay optimistic. Always optimistic.
Yeah, you'll probably just do a closing.
Sure.
All right. Well, the people don't have anything about closing, so I'm going to try to make this up. In closing, Bronco, what would, again, maybe it might just be a little repetitious, but what would be your hope again for this whole music in general in the first dance, including Quelbe as well as the dance band style, because we got those two genres, and we even got some religious music, and then we got the what's called consort music, you know, with the consort like Satolan and those people. That has seemed to have faded out a little bit in Sinclair, except for the school bands. You don't find we don't have a community band anymore. You know, give us your thoughts on that. I'm not asking you to be a prophet, but give us your thoughts on that.
I think that as with a lot of cultural phenomena, I feel that our historical, our cultural banner music, let's call it for the time being Quelbe, I think it stands a good chance of becoming cyclical. We see things come in style and it dies out and then it comes back in style. And you know, what those forces are that determine which genre would come back again, I don't know, but I suspect that, for instance, again, this same grandson, I heard him singing, you know what I heard him singing this morning? Soldier crab going to bite me tonight.
Oh,
you
yes,
know.
I know that is included in the songbook by Hugo Bond, and I never really could figure out the melody for that song. But,
It's a beautiful melody.
I gotta check it out.
It's a
because
beautiful,
I have a copy
yes.
of it, you know, but,
Okay.
And I think Hugo Bond changed the lyrics for a lot of the melodies actually because you
Okay.
know, the classroom.
Yes.
So, but that's amazing though. Soldier crab don't bite me tonight.
Yeah,
Or something. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
And he learned that in first grade here.
No, you're making me now really got to go and check that out.
And he's graduated he's in college now doing track in Texas. And he still remembers that song. That's the force of our music. You know, it puts it in a context that is permanently, to me, sealed in your mind.
And I think that's why I think the choral groups are so important.
Right.
Because once they're singing them, they don't forget them
Right,
so easy.
right.
Once you're singing it, you know what I'm saying?
I agree with you,
Yeah,
man.
man. But wow, that's amazing though that you about your grandson. That shows you, like you said, the power of the music. Yes.
Right. Thank you.